Hey guys, Mike here, and welcome back to another video on the channel. It's actually the future, and what you're about to see is the past. And if I was going to warn myself anything, it would be, do not let OCD get the better of you once again. But it's already happened. The main purpose of this video is for me just to diagnose why I was losing tread on the inside of one of my tyres. And that was from that trip I did with Evo, where we went north and I drove over a huge log, locked the steering, tried to steer, and ever since then my tracking was out. And I put it down to either bending the C or actually bending one of the steering linkages or just knocking my tracking out. But obviously things have escalated. The axle's stripped down, there's bracketry going on, there's a new bracket built for long arms, and let's just get into it. Well, I'm looking at this front end here and I can already see some damage. This track bar bracket is bent. You can see it's angled down like that, and this arm here is also bent towards the edge. Now that isn't really the reason why the steering's out, but it might be the beginning of the breadcrumb trail. But as I said in a previous video, I do need to rethink these track bar brackets. I knew that they would bend, as one of them has done a little bit before, just not that bad. I do have some steel here, and the idea is to make the other side of the bracket and potentially strengthen the bracket and stop it being levered down, because it looks severely damaged. I'm pretty sure I've bent my axle, or at least one of the C's. The tyre wear on the right hand side is significant and really badly worn. The left side, however, isn't looking too bad at all, just very slight wear on the inside tread, but nothing major. Upon further inspection though, I can't visually see or hear any component failure. Bearings and ball joints are usually suspect for this, but they're less than 6 months old, and there isn't any movement at all in the tie rods. But I need to look a little further, and first things first, I need to do an alignment check. Previously I made a jig to check the alignment, but I realised I just chopped it up months ago to build something else. So I found two pieces of metal exactly the same size and tucked them up into the top of the brake disc, 7.5 centimeters each side exactly, so I can measure them off the same point. And I'm just going to make sure this is level on this side, which it is now, and I will check the other side. Hopefully this should make it as identical as possible. Yeah, that's level. So if you did have obstructions, you would want to maybe measure on the edge, and this can be as long as you want it to, as long as it's identical the other side. So you're measuring from the same point, but I'm measuring right up to the disc. So we've got, I'm going to do this in imperial, 57 and 15/16 up the front there. So we've got no obstructions underneath, which is great, so I can get a very accurate reading. And that's 57 and 13/16. It's only slightly towed out, and a couple of turns of the tie rod set it back to 1/8 of an inch toe in, as per factory spec. None of this really counts for anything though, as it's obviously wishful thinking that a slight misalignment can cause this much tyre wear. But at least now I know for sure, and sometimes the process of elimination keeps the mind clear while you work. That's what I tell myself anyway. But now the real work begins, and I need to pull this axle apart and start measuring angles to find out where the bend is. And to do this, I'm using an app called Bubble Level, and it's a very accurate app, and it can be zeroed in on specific points on the axle to then measure other angles relative to that point. And it doesn't take me long to find out that I have a very bent upper C on my right hand side. It's 7.6 degrees into the negative, and that is not within half a degree factory spec. This is much more severe than I thought, and I really don't know how I'm going to straighten this out. The left side, however, is a bit better, but unfortunately it is still off and is still slightly bent. Well, the diagnosis is complete, and as you can see, it is a bent C. We've got about 7 degrees this side, 1.5 or 6 was it the other side. I've levelled the axle, so it doesn't actually matter about the levelling of the vehicle and all that kind of stuff. What's important is getting a 0 point to measure everything off of, which has been the axle, and I've been using an app called Bubble App, which is actually pretty useful. I use it for lots of stuff, but you can obviously then see off the 0 point that this is 7 degrees and that's 1.5, so that's kind of the most important thing. I've actually lost my voice. Nothing dodgy, but doggin.com arranged another meet and greet, and oh mate, honestly, I'm getting too old for this shit, let's just put it that way. But anyway, we need to figure out a way to fix this, because in some countries you can go, well, if you're in the US, you'd be like, so what, I'll just go get another from the junkyard. But when you live in Europe and this piece of exotic material is as rare as rocking horse shit, you can't just do that. Now I got a 4.0 out there, but I don't want to destroy that vehicle. I actually like that vehicle. I want to get it restored. Well, as soon as you start pulling parts off of it, it's forever just sat there and it will die there, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to repair this C. I'm going to straighten it as best I can. I'm probably going to fail trying, but at least I tried. Now I know what you're thinking, this is not going to work. It's a 20-ton bottle jack actually, so it should work. Well, the bottle jack shouldn't lose this fight. It's whether the grip here will lose the fight. In fact, the ball joint will probably lose the fight. The control arm is from Rough Stuff and it's extremely strong. And also you have this big tough bracket here. Now how I'm going to do the other side, I'm not going to think about that just yet. But this side is the worst of them. So I've already pumped this a little bit. I'm going to give it one more, see what happens. Oh! And now we're bang on. But what will happen is we'll release the bottle jack, and I will do it with bubble face connected, and I guarantee you it will spring back a bit. Come on now. Come on. Oh, look at that. See that go? Back to... Oh, come on. That went back a lot. Almost went back to the way it was. In fact, it did go back to the way it was. Okay. Well, just got to pump it more. What I'm saying. Watch how much this moves. The entirety of it is moving. That C is just shifting, man. It's gonna have to be rebuttoned up and everything. It's all a little bit dodge. Anyway, I'm gonna overcook it now. Let's check that on the bub. So through the miracle of bottle jacks, we are almost as straight as the barrel on an M16. In fact, why is it going the other way? Looks... I mean, if anything, we're going the other way now. But you know, there are some variations. But I think that's probably about as good as I'm going to be able to get it with this system that I'm using. Not bad, not bad. The method worked. God knows how I'm going to do the other side.
I'm actually pretty surprised that worked, and also shocked that the ball joints survived. They're obviously tougher than I thought. One thing to note though, if you do this, you must have some wheel nuts on. Also, the steering must be as straight as possible to eliminate the natural tilt you get from the knuckles when you turn the steering wheel. I'd also recommend checking angles on top of the brake disc. This is probably the point where the knuckle tilt is at its minimum. But anyway, it was a mission success, and after checking my 0 point one more time, I make a contraption to sort out the other side. Fortunately, the other side doesn't need much persuasion, given it's just a degree off. But it's worth mentioning that it's very easy to bend the axle on the long side using this method. I've got inner sleeves in this Dana 30, but still a chain is required to stop the axle bending, and it's a good practice to have the axle resting on an axle stand as well. But I've got this side within the factory spec of 0.2 degrees, and I'm going to leave it there. Mainly because this side feels really sketchy without making some kind of jig to keep the axle tube perfectly straight. So I'm pretty lucky it wasn't out by too much. Despite these two small wins with the C's, I've involuntarily committed to a lot more work than I initially realised. I need to weld in C gussets to prevent this problem from ever happening again. This means undoing all the work I recently did on the WJ knuckle brake swap. Welding gussets to the C's means the ball joints are going to get cooked, so new ball joints are a must. And now it's all apart, I might as well add a truss to the axle. And what the hell, I always wanted to do long arms too, so I should probably pull the whole thing apart and start preparing everything for the work ahead. This all feels very familiar. Now I'm this far in, I should probably give myself some extra work to do. So I'm going to cut and turn the C's to get perfect pinion angle and caster. Shouldn't be too much trouble, just clip a few welds and bash them with a hammer. That's what I've seen online anyway. I've been hammering the shit out of these things for over an hour and I'm exhausted. The right one turned fairly quickly, but the left one has been hell and it will not budge. And in fear of damaging the C, I've enlisted the help of a friend at a local tractor garage who owns some pretty heavy machinery. Although I think he's misunderstood my request, because both C's were removed upon the axle's return. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but I'm going to have to take some material off of the mating surfaces to reinstall these myself. I'm no expert, but my advice to DIYers would probably be oxyacetylene and a much bigger hammer. But anyway, at least I can clean everything easier with the moth.
Well, things have escalated quite a bit, and you can probably hear by my voice I've not been 100%. In fact, last week I went down pretty hard with the old Corona, and you know, me and the whole family have been like it, but we're all kind of back on our feet now, and I've been kind of tinkering in between. Axle wise, I'm kind of reaching the end of what I can really do in this video, because I need to really build the cross member and the long arm kit before I start doing anything else to this, because to put the C's back on and get that caster and the camber right and the pinion angle, I really need the suspension kind of in place. So all I've really done is tidied it up, if you can believe that, by looking at some of the jank welds you can see, but this is from some time ago. It's kind of why I took it off, because working on this on the Jeep has kind of resulted in a lot of awkward positions and like cleaning paint poorly and just kind of bad workmanship really on my part. But I've just plated off here and here after cleaning up the inside. Now I do need to drill just a couple of drain holes or just clip the corners off, just so there's some openings, because you do have some ways in which water can get in here and here where the coil sits, so there's no point walling it off altogether. The bar pin eliminators I've just welded on properly now, and you know, cut the back bit off some clearance for the control arms. In fact, I'm considering taking the entire back portion of this off, because this is just shite metal really, all layered together. And I'll just build an actual shock mounting position that welds to the side of the axle and maybe is braced off of the control arm bracket. But obviously this axle has inner sleeves, although they're not really enough to stop it bending. This thing bends pretty easily. So, you know, I do have some 1/2 inch thick plate here, and the idea was to make a truss to go down to here and kind of meet this point, and maybe it runs through that and this is welded to it, or I'm not too sure. Because I want to build a new long arm kit, ideally I would like a new cross member to support that, which is what I'm sort of working on at the moment. Just basically a piece of box, and it's going to have some attachments and things at the end. But I was going to use the original cross member, but I started cutting into this actually and realised it's just layer upon layer of sheet metal all kind of spot welded together, and it's extremely overweight and actually very weak for the weight that it has. But this mounts to a centre plate that's sort of sandwiched on the inside. I've cut that off. I'm going to get rid of that. Obviously, you'd be amazed how heavy that actually is. This is going to be a lot lighter, but it's going to be a lot stronger. So I've cut out a piece in the middle because I don't want it hanging too low, and I've just sort of walled that all off inside. This will have a drain hole there too, and I'll put a couple of drain holes in the bottom as well, just to allow the water to get out, and I'll fill it with cavity wax. But this is going to be just welded on there like that, and then I'm going to build some attachments on the ends to support the control arm brackets basically. Well, that brings me to the end of another episode, and a little bit of a delayed one due to the old chesty cough, which is corona, by the way, nothing else. Yeah, all right. Yeah, I'm actually in the middle of a lot of videos right now, doing this long arm build, doing the axle work. Obviously, all the stuff with taking the C's off took a lot of time, and also I'm just in the process of putting a hack and tap on. And as you can see, my drive shaft isn't quite long enough, so I'm waiting for a new drive shaft to come along, which is slightly longer. In fact, it's 10 centimeters longer, which should be perfect. So I'm in the middle of quite a lot of work, and it really wasn't intended. It just escalated, as it always does. It was just going to be unbending the C's, but then I was like, I'm going to burn out the ball joints when I put the gussets on, so I'm going to have to take the knuckles off. Well, I might as well pull the axle now. I might as well clean the axle. I might as well do all the work on the axle I always wanted to do, i.e. a truss and doing the C's and everything. And then I got the green light to do some long arms. When I imported this, it had a 6.5 inch lift. It had a 32s. It had this bumper and didn't have a winch, but one was going on soon, the tyre carrier on the back. So it was already quite heavily modified. The only thing he didn't like was the LED headlights, which I had to swap out. And other than that, it was absolutely fine. So basically, I spoke to him before I did the turbo, and he gave it the green light because he understood why I wanted a generic turbo in there, a Garrett, and why I wanted to move it. I didn't mention anything about power, obviously. But with regards to the long arms, I mentioned it again. He was fine with it, and that's why I say I've got the green light on long arms. So some of the delay in this video was me waiting to see whether I could do long arms before I started going down the route of all the other stuff on the axle and building this cross member. So all that's coming up in future videos. I'm done for today. I feel destroyed, and it's time to take a shower and have something to eat, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.